with a population of only about 300,000 people. This is not the biggest city in Europe, and yet it's still one of the capital cities of one of the most beautiful countries that I've been to. It's not the biggest city, but even though it's packed in a tiny little space, this city has so much to offer, from riverside restaurants to some incredible central markets that rival even those of some of the biggest cities in Europe. This is the capital of Slovenia, Ljubljana. Good morning guys, and welcome back to another video here from the incredible city of Ljubljana. This is of course the capital city of Slovenia, and this country has continued to shock me and surprise me over and over again. Unfortunately, today it's not the greatest weather. It's a pretty gray day, and I came out here at 6 in the morning hoping to see a sunrise. Let me tell you, that did not happen, and neither do I think sunset's going to be happening, because today the weather is terrible. There's like an 85% chance of rain, so really one of the worst days in terms of weather. But with that said, there are still quite a lot of things to do here in Ljubljana. Ljubljana is a city that everyone I've talked to who has been here has said such amazing and incredible things about this place, and honestly I'm really excited to visit this city. It's got really nice architecture, and some people even call it the most beautiful capital city of Europe. It's clean, it's sustainable, and there's so many interesting little knots about this little city that make it really great to visit. So with that said, we're gonna go ahead, despite this very terrible weather, we're gonna go ahead and explore the incredible city of Ljubljana. Starting off the day, one of the first places that you're going to want to come to here in Ljubljana is obviously the city center. You want to know where you are in the center of the city before you can start branching out from there. And right now we are in the very center of Ljubljana. This is a very beautiful, massive square in the center of the city. It's called President Square, named after the statue right behind me of President. But this is a main sort of hub for Ljubljana. You can see people are walking by it all the time, especially in the morning to get to work. The cars are driving through right now, but of course later during the day this turns into a fully pedestrian zone, which means they won't be able to drive through. Now, there are a few interesting things about this main square. First off is that it's circular. So when you think of a square, you might think of an actual square shaped, but this one is actually circular in shape, which makes it pretty interesting. The second thing is that on the other side of that square, connecting to the other banks of the river, are three bridges right next to each other. These aren't three bridges that are sort of separated along the river at different points. These are just three bridges that are right next to each other. And it's a very funny story. Apparently, sort of the main center bridge was built in the 1800s first originally to connect the two sides. It used to be an old wooden medieval bridge, but then they decided to build the middle bridge first. But then, after that, they then built two bridges on the side for pedestrians, which seemed to make sense at the time, until nowadays, where all three are just sort of the same. They're all sort of made with concrete and stone, so that there's no real difference between what's a pedestrian one and what's a vehicle one, and it doesn't really make much sense nowadays. But the remnants of those three bridges are still there. You can still cross any three of them, and it's actually quite convenient, because when the tour groups come during the day and they like hog up the entire sort of main one, at least you have two options to go across the river. One thing I've really noticed about being here in Ljubljana is that, just like the whole country, this is a very sustainable city. And when it comes to transportation, a lot of people don't opt for cars or buses. I mean, the buses do run. It's not that they don't have buses here, but a lot of people bike. It's very common here to ride your own bicycle, to cycle around the city, to cycle to work. It's a very common sort of phenomenon that you'll see here. Not only are bikes very popular, so are scooters. Not the motorcycle ones, but the sort of electronic, sustainable ones where you can just sort of go around. The thing is, Ljubljana is not a very big big city, so it actually makes sense to sort of bike around everywhere and then scoot around to everywhere because it doesn't take that much time. And especially with the electronic scooters, it's sustainable, it doesn't produce a lot of emissions, and it's safe for those walking around. So it's a very sustainable city, and if you want to get around in a very fast way, biking or scootering around might be your best bet. Now once you cross one of the 3 bridges that we mentioned earlier, on the other side of the river there is one place that is incredible because of how much is being sold here. The central market here in Ljubljana. Vendors come here and sell their fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, mushrooms, truffles, cabbage, a lot of ingredients that you would see here in traditional Slovenian cuisine. And it's very interesting that here in the morning, I mean, these people are just out here selling their vegetables, selling their fruits. They're not too pricey either, but even when it's raining, like today, when it's not exactly the greatest day, people are still out here selling their fruits and vegetables. I'm realizing the produce here is very, very fresh, specifically when it comes to strawberries. They have tons of strawberries and also a lot of mushrooms. That seems to be something that's also very popular here in Slovenia, not only in the market, but also in their cuisine as well. But as you can see, here in the early morning, it's not too busy yet. It's actually still quite a nice environment just to walk around. And for the most part, actually, tourists come here to buy sort of fruits and vegetables. And it actually runs all along the river. So it's actually a really nice place to walk. And it's not the biggest market in Europe, but it's definitely a nice one to visit when you're here in Ljubljana. Now the main old town area of Ljubljana is definitely determined by this one very important street that we're currently walking on this side of the river. You can see right over there, it's the 3 bridges, and across the river is that main square that we were at earlier. But on this side of the street is a place called Medici Trig. Trig here means the street, and this is the old town street that runs through this side of the river. Here you can see a lot of very interesting things. For instance, that building right behind me, that is the old city hall of Ljubljana, and you have incredible fountains like the one right behind me, which are great monuments of artistry and work here in Ljubljana. Now what's really interesting is that all these buildings that you see right behind me, all are traditional old Ljubljana buildings, and a lot of the things that are currently sort of existing here weren't always the case. So for example, you have a bank, for example, right here. This is Nova KPM. This is a very new, modern bank that we have here in Slovenia. However, in the olden days, this would have been a very traditional street. You'd have carpenters and wood craftsmen and metallurgy, and you have all these very classic, important skills needed for a small little town to be based around, occupying all of the little shops that we see on this main street. Now obviously over time this has changed, but hundreds and hundreds of years ago these shops would have been very historic little centers where you would get your crafts done in order to survive in this town. Now one of the crazy things is that you can actually come into the old town hall, which is where we are right now. And when you walk inside, they have so many different exhibitions here talking about Slovenian history, about Ljubljana's history, and also a lot of the initiatives and the art that has taken place here in Ljubljana. It's a really, really nice place actually. It looks really beautiful. The pillars and the arches are incredibly beautiful, and they have a traditional well here in the middle of the sort of square of the old town hall. But it's a really nice place to come in, and one of the best parts, of course, is that it's completely free. I just love that this city has all these tiny little alleyways. It's so easy to get lost and just find yourself in something like this, and you'll just have no idea where you are, but I think that's the charm of the city. It's small, it's compact, but it's got all these tiny little alleyways and mazes just like this that really take you for a little spin as you're here. Tell here, as I mentioned earlier, all these shops used to be old shops for different purposes in the past, and this is like a remnant that's been kept for an old key shop. I think you can see a big key here. This is a Karska, whatever that might be, but this should be sort of a sign for an old key shop down this alleyway. A remnant of an age long gone. I feel like a lot of these shops nowadays are just selling very, very expensive luxury items. I saw like a Rolex store down there, a lot of jewelry being sold, and also even the bakeries here are like serving like really expensive, nice macaroons. It definitely is not what it was a few hundred years ago, that's for sure. But this street has definitely changed into this sort of modern, luxury sort of street that it is today. Now, one of the great things about Ljubljana is exactly how many green spaces there are in the city. It's one of the greenest cities in the world. This is also why it's one of the most sustainable in Europe, and it's a model for sort of environmental growth in the city and urban landscape. But right here we got one of the largest sort of green areas here in Ljubljana. This is Kongresski Trg, or Congress Square, and interestingly enough it's named after the Napoleonic Congress that was literally here of Ljubljana. Now, throughout history, this is probably one of the most significant squares in Ljubljana, and the reason for that is that so many protests have taken place here. So, for example, when the Croats and the Slovenians decided to protest and gain their independence from Austro-Hungary, this was where they came to protest. When Joseph Tito came here, he used to give a speech here at this square as well. So it's been a really, really important square to the civic movements in Slovenia. And even today, it's a great sort of public area. You can see people are singing Gangnam Style at the back, because this is where people come to have sort of public sort of events and public social gatherings. It's a very nice place to be, and you can see it's so much greenery just in the middle of Slovenia, in the middle of Ljubljana. It's one of the most popular destinations, especially for locals here in the city, but it's definitely a nice place just to walk around and enjoy the local vibe when you're here in Ljubljana. Now, as you probably can see here, this starts the pedestrian zone into the center of Ljubljana, and that's where we've been for most of the day today. But when you just come out just a little bit, you start to realize that, you know, outside of those three main bridges, there are actually many other bridges that cross the river that runs through Ljubljana. And one of those bridges is the one right behind me. This is the Dragon Bridge. And it's special because it's got dragons on it. Dragons are actually a very big part of Ljubljana's culture. In fact, the city of Ljubljana is founded on this idea that apparently there's some Greek myth that a very important legend came to Ljubljana, came to Slovenia, saw a dragon, slayed the dragon, and that's why Ljubljana in Slovenia was formed today. So the dragon is an integral part of the culture and the history of Ljubljana, and they actually have a bridge to commemorate the dragons. Now you can actually find little dragons all across all of Slovenia and Ljubljana as well. So not only are you finding the dragons here on this bridge, but you can also find dragon statues all across this city. But this is probably one of the most prominent and one of the main areas where you can probably find dragons, just because the bridge is literally named after dragons. Now, after the Dragon Bridge, of course, there is still one more bridge before you get to the triple bridges that you see over there. And this is Bski Most. I think that's how you pronounce it. This is a bridge with all the love locks. Here you can see hundreds, if not thousands, of love locks, all just hanging on the actual railings of the bridge. Now, this is quite a popular place as well. Of course, many young couples will put their key locks here, and I think that's the case also in every other European city. It's very common that you always have one bridge where the couples come and put their key locks. I don't think there's much space anymore for you to put new ones, so if that's what you plan on doing, I would give up on that. But you can see we're currently right in the middle between the triple bridges on that side and the Dragon Bridge on the other side, which means that there's so many ways to actually get across the river here, and a lot of these bridges all have a lot of history. So for example, I can mention the Dragon Bridge was an old sort of dragon legend, and the triple bridge, the history of the development of the three bridges. This one is a little bit newer, as you can probably tell. It's made of glass, so you can walk on it and you can recognize that this is not as concrete or rock, but this is a lot of glass. Of course, there's some rock over there as well, but like I mentioned before, this is a newer bridge compared to the other two bridges, and well, it's just a place where you will come with your loved one and put a key lock right here. Ljubljana just has some of the most random art I've ever seen in any European city. I can't even begin to describe what this is, but it's just, I don't know what it is. And the art scene here is just a little bit crazy. Now, speaking of the art scene here in Ljubljana, if you're an art lover, specifically a street art lover, you're gonna love this place. This is AKC Metalkova. I think that's how you say it. As you can probably tell, there's a lot of street art here. This entire place is filled with street art. The history of this place is pretty interesting. Actually, these buildings used to be barracks. So there used to be military barracks that soldiers would stay in. But obviously during the 70s and 80s, street artists sort of took over this place and they turned it into their incredible artwork. I mean, you can see this incredible artwork here. I mean, this one is from 1993, I think. It's written over there. But you can see the detail. It's just been incredible. It sort of was like a sort of very liberal community here that sort of resided in this little region of Ljubljana, and it was sort of known as the forefront of this sort of movements at the time. Now, obviously, the soldiers of the barracks have long gone, and the artwork has completely eaten up this entire place and taken over. But the remnants are still there, and you can see it's a very, very beautiful place. It is a little bit outside of the main sort of old historical center of Ljubljana, but it's not too far. It's like a 15-minute walk, and you feel like you're in a completely different part of the city. Everything just looks completely different. Now, of course, I had to save the best for last. And here in Ljubljana, if there's one thing that you've got to see that everybody talks about, it's Ljubljana Grad, which is the castle of Ljubljana. It's perched atop a hill overlooking the old town, and it is an incredible fortress where you can see basically the entire city from it. But it actually costs money to go within some of the exhibitions within the castle. However, to enter the castle itself is free, and that is very important, because for a second I thought that I wouldn't be able to go in, but then I realized actually you didn't need a ticket to go into the castle, you just need a ticket for the exhibitions. But this place, I mean, look around me, that's that watchtower. It is incredible how beautiful this place is. I guess this is apparently the open-air prison. Nice they actually made it open air and not in a dungeon. Sounds like it's a pretty good deal, actually. Now, of course, Luana Castle is amazing, but what's even better than Luana Castle is the view from Luana Castle. You can literally see the entire city of Ljubljana right over there. That square, that's Congress Square. That's where we were earlier today in the day when I was telling you guys about Congress Square and its historical significance here in Ljubljana. But this is Ljubljana. It's one of the most incredible cities I've been to. Is it my favorite? I don't know. The reason I don't know is because today, honestly, the weather, if you look up there, has been terrible, and it has really affected my impression of the city. A lot of things have been closed, a lot of things have been miserable to walk through. My shoes and my socks have been completely soaked from the day, but at the same time, this city has so much charm. A lot of people say it's the most beautiful small capital city of Europe, and to be fair, with the little river that runs through, the bridges and the architecture here, it is one of the most beautiful cities that you're going to find here in Ljubljana. The other thing is that it is pretty small in terms of the old town, but venture out of the old town and you might find that Ljubljana is a little bigger than you expect. For example, if you went to Metalovka, like where we were earlier with the street art, that is a little bit outside of the old town, and when you're walking there you realize, well, actually quite a lot of people live here, and it's a bigger city than I thought. However, of course, it's nowhere near Berlin, it's nowhere near Budapest. It is still a much smaller city compared to those. But my impression of Ljubljana is that it is an amazing city. Is it the most interesting city? Perhaps not, and it probably doesn't take more than a day, maximum 2, to see everything you want. There are a few museums that may be of interest to you if you are coming to Ljubljana, but for the most part, I think this video covers most of the main things that you want to see here in the city. This has been a complete guide to the city of Ljubljana, and if you enjoyed this video, please definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe for a lot more food and travel videos. This will be our last video here from Slovenia, from its capital, Ljubljana, but trust me, there'll be a lot more videos coming soon, so make sure to stay tuned, and I'll see you all on the next one. Bye guys.